Oops, wait a minute. Okay.
Just the message that it's all being recorded, everyone.
Can you see that? Oh, good, my screen.
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good. Meg, thank you for that lovely, lovely introduction. I mean, my God, I sure hope I don't do a bad job. But thank you after all that, but thank you so much. All right. And please note at the bottom, with heartfelt thanks to Lena and Meg for hosting. I'm sorry, I have a little trouble with something here. I assume this will go down to the bottom, these little, oh, good, I can put it there. All right. So what follows? I have been so excited about today and then 2 months from now. The first part, for some of you who know my material, it'll be hopefully a refreshing refresher. And for others of you who don't know my material, there's a lot here and you may think like, whoa. But the second part, after a brief 5-minute break, the second part is a lot of really new stuff. So new that I'll be saying stuff that I haven't even thought yet. So, and it'll be co-created. Co-created is one of the words that I am so into these days. Everything is co-created from my point of view. All right. So what follows will be my rather bold attempt to formulate an overarching conceptual framework for this middle game. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have read. Let's see if I can go back. Oops. I needed to read Patricia Coughlin's. So this is a how-to playbook for the middle game in psychodynamic psychotherapy. Says Patricia Coughlin, like the middle game in chess, there is no playbook to guide us. All right, so what follows then is my attempt to formulate an overarching conceptual framework for this middle game in psychodynamic psychotherapy. And just to be starting here, I wanted to give just heartfelt thanks to a number of people who have so helped me in my journey to try to formulate this. Marlene Way, Max Firestein, Kate Stone, Ed Goodfriend, Amy Reese, Gail Buff, Hannah Levinson, Bruce Ecker, and David Feinstein. So I thank all of you and all of them. All right, in essence, this is a how-to playbook for the incremental or graduated transformation of, in the evocative words of ACT, psychological rigidity into psychological flexibility, and in the more traditional words of psychoanalysis and ego psychology, low-level defense into higher-level defense, or rigid defense into more flexible adaptation. And that's going to be the theme throughout, such that the patient, whatever her starting point, whatever her initial level of functionality, whatever her diagnosis, will become ever better able over time, ever better able. It's an ongoing process, healing cycles of disruption in reaction to challenge, and then repair in response to support, and by tapping into the patient's underlying resilience. Anyway, so that they're such that the patient will become ever better able over time to manage the myriad stressors in her life, external ones, internal ones, ever better able to respond adaptively instead of reacting defensively. So you see, I put the word defense in there, reacting defensively, less healthy, responding adaptively, more healthy. At the end of the day, therapeutic modalities that have deep and enduring psychodynamic change as their ultimate goal, for example, psychoanalysis and other depth psychologies, including but not limited to ACT, IFS, core process psychotherapy, EMDR, ISTDP, that's Habib Davenu, AEDP, Diana Fosha's, EFT, which means both emotionally focused therapy and energy techniques, emotional freedom techniques. Yes. Sorry, David Feinstein. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, sensory motor psychotherapy, Pat Ogden, somatic experiencing, Peter Levine, and psychomotor psychotherapy. So if indeed deep and enduring psychodynamic change is the ultimate goal, these different approaches must indeed be able to catalyze or galvanize transformation of defensive rigidity into more adaptive flexibility. That is the theme throughout. So different ways to put this, from dysfunctional to more functional, from constricted to wide open, from less evolved to more evolved, from simply surviving to actually thriving, from dorsal vagal shutdown to ventral vagal social engagement. Hi, Amy, thought I'd put that in there, Stephen Porges. From rigid defense to more flexible adaptation. Oh, and you'll be seeing this periodically. From same old narratives to something new, different, and better. Bruce Lee, notice that the stiffest tree is most easily cracked, while the bamboo or willow survives by bending with the wind. So flexibility, adaptability, variability, Tom Brady's pliability. Okay, so humorous example being mindless, thoughtless, reflexive, and dysfunctional. A Saturday Night Live skit in which two men are seated around a fire, chatting, and one says to the other, you know how when you stick a poker in the fire and leave it in for a long time, it gets really, really hot? And then you stick it in your eye and it really, really hurts? I hate it when that happens. I just hate it when that happens. Or the rock song by the late Warren Zevon entitled, If You Won't Leave Me, I'll Find Somebody Who Will, which speaks to the need we all have to recreate the familial and therefore familiar in Stephen Mitchell's terms, because that's all we've ever known. Having something different would create anxiety because it would highlight the fact that things could be and could therefore have been different. So again, the idea of flexibility instead of rigidity, instead of same old, rather something new, different, and better. Instead of defensive reaction, more adaptive response to the stressors, the myriad stressors to which we are being continuously exposed over the course of a day. I am here reminded of one of my favorites, Portia Nelson's autobiography in 5 short chapters, which highlights both our defensive need to maintain things as they are and our adaptive capacity ultimately to change. And again, defensive need or defensive reaction and adaptive capacity or adaptive response. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. So from rigid defense, same old, to more flexible adaptation, something new, different, and better. So what's required of therapists who are committed to doing deep work? Now, again, there's also a place for, well, more superficial work. I mean, sometimes that's called for, and there's a place for that, to be sure, in which case you'll do some sort of other things, including advice giving as the wise one and other things. But I'm talking now about doing deep work so that there can be deep, sustained, enduring, prolonged, psychodynamic, characterological, structural change. Okay, so what's required? That therapists be ever attuned to the level of the patient's anxiety, always appreciating the therapeutic value of leveraging it to incentivize change, that they develop comfort with using this level to guide them in their interventions, challenging the defense whenever possible to provide impetus, and supporting the defense whenever necessary to provide opportunity, and ultimately in the middle game, doing alternately challenging in order to destabilize, and then supporting in order to restabilize at ever higher levels of adaptability and homeostatic balance. All right, but when we are, and hello, Hannah, I'm so glad you're with us here, Hannah Levinson. All right, so when we're alternately challenging and supporting, we are thereby in the middle game creating a mismatch experience for the patient. All right, we'll say much more about that over time. And also what's required of the therapist is that they embrace the transformative or even transformational power of working through, middle game, this growth incentivizing optimal stress. That is just the right combination of challenge and support, all of which, the above, are critically important if transformation of outdated and rigid defense into updated and more flexible adaptation is the ultimate goal. So in sum, whether the treatment is crisis intervention, trauma work, short-term intensive, or longer-term broader-based, the therapeutic goal will be to advance patients from rigid to flexible and from constricted to wide open. Strategic leveraging of the patient's anxiety to incentivize transformation. Now, I'd been taught way back in my early on training, to be paying attention always to the level of the patient's anxiety, to keep your finger on the pulse of that. And yeah, that was good. But quite frankly, I then sort of forgot about it until much later when I came back to it and realized how critically important it is to use in order to galvanize or incentivize transformation of long-standing maladaptive ways of being, ways of acting, reacting, and interacting. Come to find out, it really is important, the level of the anxiety and leveraging it. So please think about this kind of dramatic picture here. Okay, one of my favorite, come to the edge. All right, come to the edge, we might fall. Come to the edge, it's too high. Come to the edge. And they came, and he pushed, and they flew. An evocative poem by Christopher Logue captures the essence of our capacity, the patient's capacity, to adapt to stress when push comes to shove. And so my whole perspective, I call it my psychodynamic synergy paradigm, I'll be saying much more about that, has to do with a profound respect for the underlying resilience that everybody has, and yes, our patients too, all of us have, the wisdom of the body, the intrinsic capacity to adapt to optimal stress, and the underlying resilience and adaptability of the system. What if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? So please note the critical role played by growth incentivizing optimal stress in jump-starting recovery. And again, as some of you are listening, I'm sure some of you are thinking, yep, of course. And others of you are thinking like, whoa, you're really going to try to stress the patient? So like, optimally, yes. All right, so the Goldilocks principle. Too much challenge will overwhelm and plummet the system into further decline because it will be too much. And I always sort of stand up on my toes when I say too much, but I won't do that now, because it will be too much to be processed, integrated, and adapted to. That's traumatic stress. When it's too much, the stressor is too much. Too little challenge will offer too little impetus and opportunity for transformation and growth, serving instead simply to reinforce the dysfunctional status quo. And in my October course that I teach through the William James College, the people in that course taught me and reinforced the idea that if we just simply offer very little challenge, we run the risk of simply reinforcing the dysfunctional status quo, unwittingly reinforcing it. Although Hannah has a really interesting point there, but we'll get to that later. All right, but just the right amount of challenge will provide just the right amount of therapeutic leverage needed to provoke, after initial destabilization or disruption, eventual re-equilibration at a higher, more evolved, because this is an evolutionary process, more evolved level of integration, functionality, and adaptive capacity. In other words, optimal, which means in essence, non-traumatic stress. So Goldilocks principle, too hot, too cold, just right. All right, now please note, I do not limit defenses to the well-known and more traditional ones. At one end of the continuum, low-level defenses, for example, regression, repression, projection, intellectualization, etc. And at the other end, higher level or more mature defenses that are more adaptive and more socially acceptable. For example, sublimation, humor, altruism, humility, and positive identifications. Rather, I define defenses more broadly as speaking to any of the self-protective mechanisms that we mobilize when made anxious in the face of stressors. At one end of the continuum, what happens reflexively, knee-jerk, mindlessly, reflexively, when we are confronted with stressors that overwhelm us with anxiety, to which I refer as low-level defenses or rigid defenses. Same old, same old. At the other end, what happens more reflectively, not reflexively, but now more reflectively, when we are confronted with stressors that we are more easily able to take in our stride, to which I refer as higher level defenses or more flexible adaptations. So at one end of the continuum, defensive reactions, at the other end, adaptive responses. Either we, made anxious, react to stressors by defending, defensive reaction, or we, more resilient, respond to stressors by adapting, adaptive response. And you'll discover that I think in terms of moment by moment. It's not sort of like the person is somebody who's ever busy defensively reacting, or they're able adaptively to respond. It's moment by moment how they handle, how they manage the impact of the stressor coming their way. All right. Life is not about, paraphrasing that a bit, defensively waiting for the storm to pass, but about adaptively learning to dance in the rain. Okay, we cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how we cope with it, find meaning in it, and move forward with renewed purpose. So people think that apparently that Viktor Frankl wrote this, said this. Apparently he didn't, but it's as if he did, and he could have anyway. So the existential psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I think of that sort of more as between stimulus and what then follows is a space. And in that space, as this applies to the clinical situation, in that space is our power either, and Kate Stone helped me to understand something about extending this space, either to react defensively by wallowing in our despair and abnegating responsibility for our lives, or to respond adaptively by acknowledging that despite our despair, from this point forward, the meaning we make of our lives is entirely up to us. Not only do we have the freedom to create that meaning, but we also have the responsibility to do so. It has been suggested that 10% of what happens to us is life, but 90% is how we react or respond to it. Sartre, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. With it being understood that the relationship between defense and adaptation, yes, is a yin-yang relationship. These self-protective mechanisms are complementary, not opposing forces. For example, light cannot exist without shadow. Furthermore, all defenses have an adaptive component, just as all adaptations serve a defensive function. Nonetheless, and more generally, although defenses might once have been necessary for the patient to survive, as defenses become updated to adaptations, the patient becomes better able to thrive. The therapeutic action in a treatment where the ultimate goal is deep change is indeed designed to transform merely surviving into actually thriving. Beautiful quote by Maya Angelou. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. Okay, Now, just as we can burn a field of grass in order to stimulate it to grow back greener, healthier, and more lush than before, that's what this section is about. We can do that. In essence, we're going to be talking about controlled damage to the body in order to jumpstart or trigger healing. And I'm actually going to be suggesting that we will be, in a thoughtful, careful way, superimposing an acute injury on top of a chronic one. And that's what's going to trigger or jumpstart healing. And again, some of you are like, oh my God, we can't be injuring our patients. Or, well, an optimal injury, an optimal challenge, an optimal stress may be destabilized and then restabilized at ever higher levels of adaptability, ongoing iterative healing cycles of disruption, repair, disruption, repair. And that's the middle game. All right. In the physiological realm, superimposing an acute physical injury on top of a chronic one is sometimes exactly what the body needs in order to heal. Controlled damage to provoke healing. Just some examples. I love these, so I'll read some of them. High intensity interval training, intermittent fasting, ischemic preconditioning, intermittent hypoxic training, hyperbaric oxygen, homeopathy, vaccines and other immunotherapies, dermabrasion, fraxel laser treatments, platelet-rich plasma, platelet-rich fibrin, vampire gum rejuvenation. Not that you need to know this, but I'm going to have some of that done by my holistic dentist. That was probably TMI, but whatever. Botox, stem cell facelifts, ECT, TMS, defibrillation of the heart, pulse wave therapies, acupuncture, acupressure, cupping, red light therapy, infrared saunas, cryotherapy, brain teasers, and mental exercises. When the body is optimally challenged, no matter how compromised it might be in its functionality, adaptive recovery will be triggered because of the body's innate resilience. All right, so here's some sort of fun examples. Therapeutic use of optimal stress to provoke recovery. Did you know that depriving yourself of half a night's sleep once a week, preferably the second half of the night, for example, from 3 to 7 a.m., can produce a rapid, even if short-lived, restabilization of mood and recovering from depression? The stress of interrupting normal sleep patterns may, the thought is, resynchronize disturbed circadian rhythms. Intermittent fasting, a 36-hour water fast. I do this periodically once a week. For example, from after dinner on Monday evening, say 9 p.m., to before breakfast on Wednesday morning, 9 a.m., can so significantly reduce the total body burden, the optimal stress of that mental clarity and focus can be improved dramatically and a sense of overall well-being restored. Intermittent fasting is also associated with increased levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, depleted levels of which are thought to be associated with depression. Interestingly, the only type of calorie restriction diet that will not slow down your metabolism is intermittent fasting. Okay, and this is just fun. I'll read it real quick. More specifically, optimal challenge of the brain will sharpen mental acuity, decelerate cognitive decline, and combat the effects of aging on the brain. I think about this one all the time as I'm getting older and older. Just as athletes can improve their physical fitness by optimally challenging their bodies with physical exercise, so too all of us can improve our brain fitness by optimally challenging our minds with brain teasers, mathematical puzzles, word games, crossword puzzles, Sudoku, logic problems, memory challenges. Any mental exercise requiring deliberate and concentrated effort, active repetition, focused attention, meditation, reflection, juggling is a really good one. I tried to do that for a while, but didn't work so well. Or learning, I was throwing these little balls all over the place and it just too much effort to sort of pick them up all the time. Or learning any new skill or new language will promote mental agility and forestall the inexorable decline in mental capacity as we age. In addition to puzzles and games, our brains will be stimulated when we're exposed to situations that are new, unusual, different, novel, or unexpected. And I want you to be thinking about the creation of mismatch experiences where you juxtapose two things, old, bad, new, good, middle game, psychodynamic psychotherapy. So when our daily routines are disrupted, or when we combine two senses, a form of cross-training for the brain, like simultaneously listening to music and smelling flowers and really appreciating them, or watching a sunset and tapping our fingers. I should do that when I'm walking along the beach down here. So just kind of be tapping my fingers while I'm watching the sunset. I will do that. Or this one's a killer, printing with one hand while cursive writing with the other. And you can just feel that you're like, well, either exhausting yourself and you have to go take a nap, or that you're really sort of expanding your capabilities. All right, so by the same token, in the psychological realm, the therapeutic provision of growth incentivizing optimal stress is necessary if deep and sustained psychodynamic change is the ultimate goal of treatment. More specifically, optimally stressful therapeutic interventions are specifically designed to generate internal tension by alternately challenging to destabilize, and then supporting to restabilize the defense, precipitating disruption with the challenge in order to trigger or jumpstart repair with the support in the form of this optimally stressful psychotherapeutic intervention. I'll be sharing a few of those with you today. I shared other times, and I did that in some of the readings that I sent you. I've given you some examples. Are specifically designed to generate, yes, thereby creating this internal dissonance will be done repeatedly as part of the working through process. More specifically, challenging the patient's rigid defenses against a backdrop of empathic resonance, in the words of Tanya Singer, will create homeostatic imbalance, a state of disequilibrium that cannot, however, be tolerated by the system for long, prompting restoration of equilibrium, that is, re-equilibration, but each time at a healthier level. These are the iterative healing cycles, each time at a healthier level of homeostasis and adaptive capacity, a level ever more evolved because of the synergy between the therapist's external support in the form of the optimally stressful intervention that does also support, the synergy of that and the patient's internal reserves, her underlying resilience, her innate striving towards health, her intrinsic capacity to adapt to optimal stress, or in the words of Walter Buchanan, the wisdom of her body. So you don't just come back to where you were, you evolve, you advance to ever higher levels. That's the point. And down to here, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. But I guess stand up a little taller each time, I guess would be implied. So the net result of these iterations will be the generation of ongoing healing cycles of disruption and repair, destabilization and restabilization, but each time at ever higher levels of adaptability, flexibility, variability. And heart rate variability is a good thing. You want to have it. You don't want to have lub dub, lub dub, lub dub as your heart rate, the beat, so monotonic. Rather, you want it lub dub, lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. There's variability and adaptability in that, which is what we want, such that psychological rigidity will eventually become transformed into flexibility. All right. We might therefore say of psychodynamic or psychoanalytic psychotherapy that it offers the following. Psychodynamic psychotherapy affords the patient both impetus and opportunity, albeit belatedly after the fact, to master traumatic experiences that had once been overwhelming, i.e. too much, and therefore defended against, but that can now, with enough support from the therapist, and by tapping into the patient's underlying resilience and intrinsic, inborn, innate, inherent capacity to adapt to stress, be revisited. This is the working through middle game, revisited, reprocessed, and reframed, such that growth impeding defenses once necessary for survival, can be gradually transformed into growth promoting adaptations, stronger at the broken places. Hemingway, the world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken places. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. They say that what people who know me know that I love the minions, and I have a number of minions. I keep them here at my house. There's Stuart and his brother Stuart, and actually they're on the very last slide, Stuart and his brother Stuart. Anyway, they say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But if that's the case, then I'll be expecting my superpowers any day now. All right, so briefly, my psychodynamic synergy paradigm, a synergistic approach to deep healing. 5 different approaches to galvanizing transformation of psychological rigidity into psychological flexibility. Psychodynamic approaches that involve, whether directly or indirectly, superimposing an acute injury on top of a chronic one. I mean, our patients come to us with chronic injuries, same old stuff they've been doing for a very long time, that on some level is serving them, there's benefit, but on some level is costing them. All right, superimposing acute injury on top of chronic one to jumpstart recovery. Okay, here we go. You don't need to be knowing all this, but I want to just, for some of you, sort of, yep, we know that. And for others of you, huh? All right, but 5 interdependent and mutually enhancing modes of therapeutic action. All right, model 1, enhancement of knowledge within. And that's the interpretive perspective of classical psychoanalysis. Model 2, provision of experience for. Notice the prepositions. I like symmetry, but you probably figured that out by now. The corrective provision or deficiency compensation perspective of self-psychology. Model 3, engagement in relationship with. The intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory. And one of my books called Modes of Therapeutic Action, enhancement of knowledge, provision of experience, and engagement in relationship, won an award from Jason Aronson. And I have now been asked to do an updated version of it, edition of it, and I'm excited about that. So all the mistakes that I'd made those almost 25 years ago now, I'm just going to discreetly sort of fix them a little bit, and hopefully people will forget about that first book and they'll read the revised edition. All right, but model 4, since then, I keep adding a model for every decade. And so in the 70s, it was classical psychoanalytic. In the 80s, it was self-psychological and other deficit models. In the 90s, it was contemporary relational theory. Of course, do the math, and then you know how old I am. At model 4 here, nurturing of surrender to, this is that decade from 2000 to 2010, whatever you call that, an existential humanistic approach to mending brokenness, thank you, Gina, and easing existential angst. And model 5, so that was that decade. In model 5, envisioning of possibilities beyond, that was the teens, 2010 to 2020, a quantum neuroscientific approach to overcoming neural entrenchment and analysis paralysis. And recently, when I presented some of these ideas on a Zoom, literally people made me, but then everything's co-created, made me admit that I've been thinking about my model 6. I haven't included it here because I have this whole decade, 2020 to 2030, to work on it, but it's a holistic, that one will be, let's see, model 5 will be facilitating of flow of information and energy throughout. And I know there's someone on the call here with flow state psychology, so I hope you'll like that one. So model 6 is facilitation of flow of information and energy throughout the extracellular matrix, or the divine matrix, or what I call the mind-body matrix. Anyway, let's not worry about that. All right, so we have knowledge, experience, relationship, surrender, and possibilities. We have within, we have for, we have with, we have to, we have beyond. Whew, okay, just when you finally got this. All right, if you think about the first 4, come to find out, this is a care, C, cognitive, A, affective, R, relational, E, existential, approach to deep healing. Did I get lucky or what? So a cognitive, affective, relational, existential approach to deep healing. The only problem is, of course, it's not going to include my model 5 because, care, C, and then holistic, H. So I have to figure out something for that. And then, of course, model 7, and let's hope I keep living, will be my spiritual, from something to awakening. But whatever, that's way beyond me. I'm not evolved enough yet to get to that, but that'll happen. All right, now notice this is a moment by moment something. Model 1 focuses in a little bit more on structural conflict, right? Classical psychoanalytic. Model 2, structural deficit. It's self-psychology. Model 3, Stephen Mitchell's relational conflict. This is the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory. Model 4, and the model 4 is Larry Hedges, my dear friend Larry Hedges, made me come up with model 4 because he said he was one of the few people who knew my theory well enough to know what was missing. And so he said that literally wasn't going to let me out of the car. He was driving me from, I'm giving a conference out there in LA to LAX. He wasn't going to let me get out of the car until we had come up with a model 4 and a way to describe it. So with that kind of almost traumatic stress, but optimal stress, we did indeed come up with something. So model 4, an existential humanistic approach, is relational deficit, and model 5, constructivist. So this is about old bad narratives and new good narratives, and a quantum neuroscientific approach. It's about neural entrenchment. All right, but notice the N words. Moment by moment, if in the moment, the point of emotional urgency would seem to be the patient's neurotic conflictedness, neurotic N, right? Model 2, narcissistic vulnerability. Though again, we all have all of these. These are interdependent, mutually enhancing. It's not like somebody, oh, well, they're model 1. Oh, well, they're model 2. So it's not really DSM, oriented. Not really, just moment by moment. We could say neurotic conflictedness. Model 2, narcissistic vulnerability, narcissistic woundedness, perhaps even narcissistic entitlement. Model 3, noxious relatedness. So when they're ever busy playing out unmastered early on relational traumas on the stage of their life and in the treatment. Noxious relatedness and sort of alienating and putting people off. Model 4, non-relatedness, affective non-relatedness. Arne Modell talks about that, non-relatedness. And model 5, non-actualization, because you had analysis paralysis, so it's non-actualization. So those are the N words. Okay, now, optimally stressful interventions, middle game. Conflict statements, disillusionment statements, and again, I'll present a lot more of these when you come back 2 months from now, which I hope you will. All right, conflict statements, disillusionment statements to facilitate grieving. So conflict statements, it's more interpretive, cognitive, whatever. Model 2, disillusionment statements to facilitate grieving, more affective. Model 3, accountability statements for the person who has the noxious relatedness, and to facilitate accountability on the parts of both therapist and patient. Model 4, and forgive me, I call them patients. I hope that's okay. It means client, but I call them patients. I hope that's okay. All right, model 4, facilitation statements. You might say to somebody, a part of you is desperate to be seen, known, understood, but another part of you is terrified of being found. So you're juxtaposing there. Anyway, facilitation statement, optimally stressful. All right, envisioning of possibilities beyond, okay, good. Quantum disentanglement statements. All right, so those are the different kinds of optimally stressful interventions that you could use if there's neurotic conflictedness, model 1, narcissistic vulnerability, model 2, a noxious relatedness, model 3, non-relatedness, model 4, and non-actualization, model 5. Moment by moment, as you sit with the patient, what you sense is the point of emotional urgency. Okay, now the various statements. Oh, okay, now this is important slide here. Will facilitate, the various statements will facilitate, again, from defense to adaptation, from resistance to awareness, okay, classical psychoanalytic. I could have said resistance to insight, but I don't want to say that, right? Because insight starts with the letter I, and I needed to start with the letter A. So the defenses you will see in all 5 models start with the letter R, and the adaptations start with the letter A. And so so from resistance, 2, insight or awareness. And you do that by way of interpreting, more cognitive, classical psychoanalytic. Model 2, from relentless hope, the thing that I write about and talk about, to sober, mature acceptance. Model and grieving. Grieving will be the optimal stressor, the middle game, the means by which you facilitate advancement of the patient from relentless refusal to confront and confront and grieve the reality of the object's limitations, separateness, and immutability by way of grieving, cycling through the grieving, ultimately to sober, mature acceptance. So grieving is the cutting edge of the therapeutic work that needs to be done in those moments. So model 1, interpreting, more cognitive. Model 2, grieving, more affective. Model 3, negotiating, at the Darlene Ehrenberg's intimate edge in their relationship, the here and now engagement, from compulsive and unwitting reenactment, there's your word, the patient, of unmastered early on relational traumas, to accountability. And parenthetically in model 3, where it's really an intersubjective perspective and there's mutuality of impact and co-creation of everything, of course, it will mean accountability on the part of the therapist as well, who might well have started the whole thing, to which the patient then is reacting in the form of some kind of reenactment. So in model 3, it's sort of like, takes the 2 to tango, the 2 to create, we think projective identification, the 2 to sort of create the situation, mutual impasse, Paul Russell's crunch situation, and then ultimately the 2 to wend their way out of what has become transference, countertransference, entanglement, with contributions from both. Model 4, from relational absence to authentic presence. And so we got the R word, and we got the A word. And now you see why Larry Hedges had to kind of keep me in the car for quite some time, because we're kind of struggling. We actually sort of thought retreat, that works. Retreat, that's the defense, right? Schizoid retreat, but retreat, relational absence to authentic presence or accessibility or availability. All right. And then model 5, I kind of have to put in 2 here, disentangling from the toxicity of the past and the old bad from the past, and envisioning new good for the future. So from refractory inertia to actualizing action. All right. All right. So this is a little complicated. I'm just going to say it. You can refer back to it later. So the growth incentivizing optimal stressor. There is sort of a lovely symmetry here, so I just couldn't help myself. I just had to include this slide. I was back and forth, but I decided I had to. Model 1, cognitive dissonance, right? We know about that, classical psychoanalytic. Model 2, that's the cutting edge of the work that needs to be done. Middle game. Affective disillusionment. Model 2, affective disillusionment. Grieving, disillusionment. The positive transference disrupted. Model 3, relational detoxification. Are you noticing all the optimal stressors start with the letter D? So in essence, if the defenses start with R, the adaptations start with A, and the optimal stressors start with D, then my system is rad. Okay, all right, anyway, so model 4, existential dependence. And so again, Larry and I are sitting in the car, big LAX is whatever, my plane is really about to take off, but no, can't get out of the car until we come up with a D word that is the optimal stressor. So, and since model 1 is cognitive, right? Care, C-A-R-E, right? Cognitive, affective, relational, E, existential. So since it's existential, humanistic existential perspective, it had to start with the letter E. So existential, that's okay, existential. And so it's helping the patient, Masood Khan here, overcome their dread of surrender to resourceless dependence, or we could say analytic oneness, in the words of Ofra Eshel, an Israeli psychoanalyst. So helping them to overcome, you could say existential dread, there's a D word, but we wanted to say existential dependence. So Larry and I said, okay, existential dependence, we have it. And he let me out of the car and I caught the plane. And so I've added model 4. And since then, it's sort of like my model is so much better that I feel almost have to go back and apologize to all my patients when I wasn't quite fully aware of model 4, but be that as it may. So I got home and I looked on my computer and I thought, I wonder what existential dependence, if other people talk about it. Lo and behold, the existentialists, philosophers, they talk about it, and it means exactly what I wanted it to mean, which is being absolutely dependent upon another for one's very existence. And for a while, when there is the analytic oneness and a, Michael Ballan's words, a peaceful state, a blissful state of peaceful merger, indeed, there will come moments in the treatment where, if all goes well, and the patient is struggling with non-relatedness, affective non-relatedness to being engaged in the world in moments of meeting, it's critically important that there be able to be analytic oneness. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off track there. Model 5, quantum disentanglement. They're the D words. So that's the work that needs to be done, the optimal stressor that needs to be negotiated as part of working through. Okay, good. So synergy. So my motto is so about synergy that I bought this from Shutterstock. This is mine, synergy, and I love that image. All right, so my psychodynamic synergy paradigm. Again, all 5 models capitalize upon, this is my last slide, that we're going to take a few questions, please, and then a 5-minute break. And then I come back to the second half, which is a real challenge for me. All right, again, all 5 models capitalize upon the therapeutic provision of optimal stress to advance the patient from long-standing, deeply entrenched, maladaptive rigidity, outdated defense, same old, to newfound, more evolved, more adaptive flexibility. Updated adaptation, something new, different, and better. The ultimate goal being deep and enduring structural or characterological or psychodynamic change. As one of my mentors always delighted in telling us, if the patient asks you where the bathroom is, you can tell her, but don't call it therapy. Anyway, I love that one. All right, so let me stop sharing. And I would be very pleased to take a few questions with some hand raises from people. I think I will. Okay, so let's see. Did I do it? Do you see my slide?
We can.
Oh, good. Thank you. All right, get that out of the way. All right, so here we go. Now, this, oh my goodness. Okay, well, oh, here. Okay, this. Stress is when you wake up screaming, and then you realize you haven't fallen asleep yet. Well, I have been struggling so much with this second part, creating my transformation playbook, that actually happened for me last night. I mean, as I was trying to sleep, or at least pretending I was sleeping, and then it's just like, oh my God, I've just been so busy, as Marlene Way knows, and some of you others know, I've just been so busy just trying to sort of figure out what I really want to say about the beginning game, minimally stressful, the middle game, optimally stressful, and the end game, where it's no stress and we offer celebratory interventions. Yes. Okay. Okay, so here we go. The poorest understood and 2 most enigmatic words in psychoanalysis are working through, Peter Giafficini and Freud. This working through of the resistances, defenses, may in turn out to be an arduous task for the subject of the analysis and a trial of patience for the analyst. All right, Milton Erickson. Until you're willing to be confused about what you already know, what you know will never grow bigger, better, or more useful. So I was using that to comfort myself when I was finding myself feeling so very confused about what I was about what I already know and what I wanted to be saying in this second half. But what you know will never grow bigger, better, or more useful unless you're willing to really to take a look at what you already know. All right, so for decades, I've been trying to formulate an overarching conceptual framework for the working through process in psychodynamic psychotherapy, a theoretical framework that would make explicit the process whereby psychological rigidity, defense, same old, could be incrementally transformed into psychological flexibility, adaptation, something new, different, and better. And I think I've finally succeeded part way in developing what I call a transformation playbook that roughly outlines the steps involved. So what follows is an overview of the pieces of the puzzle that I've used to create this transformation playbook for the graduated or incremental morphing of defense into adaptation. It's not just a straight line progression, but rather iterative healing cycles of disruption and repair in the middle game. Do you love this slide or what? I created it, I put it together from things I found online. So the transformation, I'm glad it is with you too, the transformation playbook. And here we have a beautiful, beautiful butterfly. All right. So we think about Hegel's dialectic, and I was calling it the Hegelian dialectic until someone suggested that I should call it the way it's really called, which is the Hegelian dialectic. So that sort of sounds whatever. So I'm going to say Hegel's dialectic. Hegel's dialectic has been an important part of my formulating this overarching conceptual framework, whereby the contradiction. Now, I'm very eager and open to having some of this stuff challenged, all of it challenged, whatever. This is a work in progress. So Hegel's dialectic, whereby Thomas Ogden writes about dialectical stuff, as do others. But anyway, Hegel did, whereby the contradiction between a proposition, the thesis, and its negation, the antithesis, is resolved by advancing to a higher level of truth, synthesis. So that's Hegel's dialectic. Now, in psychodynamic psychotherapy, this synthesis, basically an adaptive reconciling of two seemingly irreconcilable entities, typo, will be the result of working through this synthesis, an adaptive reconciliation of two contradictory somethings, thesis and antithesis, will be the result of working through an optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experience, a violation of expectation, if you will, or a prediction error, created by the therapist's repeated juxtaposition. Now we're doing something. The therapist's repeated juxtaposition of thesis and antithesis. So first you're going to need to define or locate or identify the thesis and the antithesis, which you're going to do in the beginning game. But then with your interventions, you are going to repeatedly juxtapose thesis and antithesis. That is, and this is where I'm saying this, but I'm really willing to have this slightly reframed by you all if you'd like me to. So juxtaposition of the anxiety assuaging benefit of the defense and its anxiety provoking cost. Yeah, okay, I'm saying that. I do want to say that. So the juxtaposition of benefit and cost, because all defenses are ambivalently, so this big fancy word psychoanalysts use, ambivalently cathected, meaning ambivalently invested with libidinal energy to the extent that they satisfy, they benefit, there's an upside, and aggressively cathected or aggressively invested to the extent that they frustrate and cause pain. All right, with an eye to generating enough, so you're juxtaposing thesis and antithesis, with an eye to generating, in the middle game, enough internal tension that the stress and strain of this dissonance, this growth incentivizing mismatch experience, middle game, will provide the therapeutic leverage needed for the patient gradually to relinquish the tenacity of her attachment to the defense. Think of, reminiscent of Freud's adhesiveness of the id, with both aggressive and libidinal energies. All right, so enough dissonance that this mismatch experience will provide the therapeutic leverage needed for the patient gradually, it's an incremental morphing, to relinquish the tenacity of her attachment to the defense, the thing they've been doing, in Stephen Mitchell's words, the familial and therefore familiar, what's comfortable, the modus operandi, the thing they've been doing their whole lives. The tenacity of her attachment to the maladaptive old bad defense in favor of a more acceptable compromise position, an adaptive solution, an adaptive resolution. It's not sort of like, this is it, but it's better. So one that will be only somewhat costly, because there'll still be some cost. It's always a compromise, and at least, I don't know if it's and at least or but at least good enough, even if not always the ideal result. An adaptive reconciliation or synthesis of two seemingly irreconcilable entities. I spelled it right that time, thesis and antithesis. In essence, psychodynamic interventions that repeatedly juxtapose the anxiety assuaging benefit, where you support, and the anxiety provoking cost, where you challenge by highlighting this, of holding on to the defense, will create the homeostatic imbalance that we've been talking about all along, a state of disequilibrium. This is almost a repeat of the slide I'd said earlier, that cannot, however, be tolerated for long, prompting restoration of equilibrium, that is re-equilibration, but each time at a more evolved level of homeostasis and adaptive capacity. This is almost the same slide as I put in the first half. Because of the synergy between the therapist's external support in the form of the optimally stressful intervention that has challenge, yes, and support, that synergy of that and the patient's underlying resilience. Okay, now this, even I don't understand this slide, and I wrote it, but this is something you get to refer, thank you for smiling, Aslan. You get to look, refer back to this when and if and ever you ever want to, but it's about, it's the overview, advancing from defense to adaptation by working through optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences created in the middle game, created by the juxtaposition of these two seemingly irreconcilable entities. That is the benefit of the defense, how it serves them, and the cost of the defense, the price they pay. So I'm not going to get model one, the experience as you are helping them to evolve from resistance to awareness. You're interpreting by juxtaposing gain and pain to create the mismatch experience of cognitive dissonance. And basically gain, what was once ego syntonic, becomes pain, ego dystonic. For those of us who trained a long time ago, we used to call it that. Ego syntonic is where it's a little bit kind of not so good. I was going to say a bad word, but I don't want that bleeped out. It's sort of like not so good, but it works for the patient. So it's secondary gain. It's sort of like, that works for me. I'm sorry. Yes, initially there is gain for them, it's ego syntonic, and we want it to become more ego dystonic such that they'll be more better able to relinquish it. Model two, from relentless hope to acceptance, grieving becomes relevant here, relentless hope, by juxtaposing good and bad, illusion and disillusionment, creating the mismatch experience of affective disillusionment, grieving that. Illusion become disillusionment. Model three, from reenactment to accountability, this is about negotiating at Darlene Ehrenberg's intimate edge. And from reenactment, by juxtaposing bad and good, because we're talking now about often projective identification, to create the mismatch experience of relational detoxification, bad or distorted sense of the therapist as being some version of your old dad, to now a slightly modified something that's not nearly as bad as one had imagined that object, the therapist, would be. You don't have to understand this, but I just kind of want to give you an overview here. Model four, from relational absence to authentic presence, nurture relational absence, analytic oneness, by juxtaposing lost and found, hidden and seen, to create the mismatch experience of existential dependence, lost become found, hidden become seen. Even I don't quite understand that, but whatever. Model five, from refractory inertia to action and actualization of potential. Deconsolidate, unlock refractory inertia, destabilize it by juxtaposing old bad narrative and new good narrative, or same old narrative and something new, different, and better, to create the mismatch experience of quantum disentanglement, whereby you're trying to disentangle the patient from the toxicity of her past in order to free her up to move forward into the present. Old bad become new good, same old become something new, different, and better. I just want you to kind of get a sense of the overarching conceptual framework for what you're really trying to do. All right, so Hegel's dialectic would have it, so getting a little simpler now. would have it that the process of change always involves the synthesis of two contradictory, mismatched, and seemingly irreconcilable forces, thesis and antithesis. My addition is working through contradictions, change, synthesis. And I believe you get there by way of the middle game. So the beginning game will be identifying thesis and antithesis, and the end game, for the moment, will be synthesis. Working through is the way you get from beginning to end. That's the process of change. However, the synthesis usually then becomes a new thesis. This is an evolutionary process, along with a new correlative antithesis. And the process, the fractal pattern, thank you, Marlene Way, for this, will start all over again. Fractal signifies the repetition of similar patterns throughout. Version 1, version 2, version 3, etc. So here's the dialectic working through. Synthesis becomes the new thesis. So here we have an upward spiral. I love it. I found this online. I added the words working through. Thesis, antithesis, working that through to a synthesis, which becomes then the new thesis, working it through by way of the antithesis to synthesis, etc., etc. Ultimately from defense to adaptation. So whether directly or indirectly, and whether explicitly or implicitly, I would like to suggest that growth incentivizing psychodynamic interventions will juxtapose anxiety assuaging thesis and anxiety provoking antithesis in order to arrive at a synthesis, a compromised position. Again, repeated juxtaposition of benefit and cost, alternately stabilizing and destabilizing the defense. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, will create the growth incentivizing therapeutic leverage, such that in order to resolve the internal tension between mismatched thesis and antithesis, and thereby restore the homeostatic balance, same old will ultimately morph into something new, different, and better. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Now, see, I don't pronounce that right, but you know what I mean. When I let go of the same old that I am, I become the something new, different, and better that I might be. In essence, the process of reconciliation will involve the introduction of either, so in the middle game, this is what happens, of either new information or new experience that is discrepant, discordant, contradictory, such that the synthesis, Hegel, of thesis and antithesis will be catalyzed by the growth incentivizing transformational or transformative, we can talk more about that if we want later, mismatch. Okay, now neuroscientists had long believed that once a new experience, especially a traumatic one, had been stored in long-term memory, it would be permanently installed. Perhaps it could then be modified by subsequent experiences, but its essence would nonetheless remain intact. Lurking just beneath the surface as a somatic memory, ever vulnerable to being reactivated and re-experienced, thereby reinforcing its intensity before once again returning to body consciousness. This was very much in keeping with Hebb's postulate, advanced in 1949 by the neuropsychologist Donald Hebb. Neurons that fire together, wire together, meaning that reactivated and re-experienced memories are simply reinforced through repetition and never resolved. But we now know that, fortunately, as a result of the work done by the neuroscientists, cognitive neuroscientists in their laboratories, we now know that, fortunately, this is not the whole story. Were this to be the case, then we would certainly be doing our patients a grave disservice were we to be ever busy inviting them in the treatment to revisit and re-experience their early on traumas, without then offering them as an alternative something new, different, and compellingly better. Fortunately, over the course of the past 2 decades, a dedicated group of trailblazing cognitive neuroscientists dissatisfied with the deterministic idea that memories are forever, have been using advanced neuroimaging techniques, including functional MRI, scanning microscopy, and optogenetics, a new technology, to map out what happens in the brain when a thought is being thought, a feeling felt, and a memory remembered. Their focus has been on how old memories, consolidated in long-term memory and distributed in networks throughout the cortical limbic system, can be subsequently updated and reconsolidated. Indeed, these researchers are discovering that the brain, in response to ongoing, I get so excited just reading this, in response to ongoing new information and experience, is continuously adapting by modifying itself at the level of the neural synapse in order to stay current and relevant. Evolutionary. This learning process involving both, the neuroscientists in our labs have discovered, the destruction of old neural networks and the construction of new ones, speaks to the adaptive capacity of the brain and the dynamic nature of memory. In essence, the brain's remarkable neuroplasticity. More specifically, neuroscientists have recently made the groundbreaking discovery that when memories are reactivated and re-experienced, the network of synapses in the brain encoding these memories will become unlocked for a time-limited period. This unlocking or deconsolidation signals the opening of a reconsolidation window, a brief window of opportunity when memories become transiently fragile and sensitive to modification by environmental input. Both this dedicated group of cognitive neuroscientists who study memory reconsolidation in their laboratories and the similarly impassioned group spearheaded by Bruce Ecker and David Feinstein of neuroscientifically inclined clinicians who study it in their offices agree that 4 to 5 to 6 hours is the critical time frame for the destabilized synapses encoding the old bad traumatic memories to remain malleable and therefore vulnerable to updating by new information and experience, such that these synapses can be rewired under the right circumstances and the traumatic memories they encode reprogrammed. Oh. So I used an ascending spiral staircase. I found this online. This is perfection. An ascending spiral staircase with its series of landings is, I believe, an evocative visual metaphor for neuroplasticity and the incremental morphing of defense into adaptation, with each successive landing representing a new synthesis of both the thesis and the antithesis that had come before, and with the stairs themselves from one level to the next, representing the steps in the working through process. All right, I hope you like that picture and get that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth and others. Okay, so now we go. The beginning game, a landing. It could be the ground or it could, because fractals. Okay, so the beginning game, a landing. Now, let me say, again, this would be here, as we're thinking about thesis and antithesis, which we are, we're thinking about teasing out. So we use minimally stressful interventions. We'll talk more about them in 2 months. Minimally stressful interventions that will tease out the defense and gently, and the defenses could be resistance, relentless hope, reenactment, relational absence, refractory inertia, or any other kind of defense. Any other kind of defense where the person, is made so anxious that they react defensively rather than responding adaptively. So any defense at all, but those are the ones we're familiar with and we've named in our 5 models. So the use of, in the beginning game, a landing, on the landing, minimally stressful interventions that will tease out gently, just minimal anxiety. We're not doing any juxtaposing, no mismatch experiences. We're not creating any problems here yet. That will tease out the defense and gently highlight both the anxiety assuaging benefit, the thesis, and the anxiety provoking cost, but just ever so gently, the antithesis of holding on to it. In essence, the players are being identified for this playbook, transformation playbook. The beginning game, therefore, lays the groundwork and sets the stage for the actual working through that will take place in the middle game as the stairs are being climbed. I couldn't resist it. The beginning game. Minimal stress. There are the players. Okay. And okay, Lena, I just love your facial expression. If that's the expression you have when you talk with your patients are lucky, lucky people. All right. The middle game, the stairs between landings. This is the heart of the working through process, and just kind of threw in there interpreting, grieving, negotiating, at the intimate edge, surrendering, and disentangling, envisioning. Okay, but whatever. Now we use optimally stressful interventions that will offer both impetus and opportunity for transformation and growth by alternately challenging the defense to destabilize it, and then supporting the defense to restabilize it, juxtaposing both cost, antithesis, and benefit, thesis, all done with an eye to introducing a mismatch experience. So you put the parts together. The patient might not have done that. So they're the players, they're just kind of rumbling around. They know they're gaining a lot of weight. I'm going to give a few examples in a moment. They know they love to eat. They also know that they hate how fat they've become, but they haven't really kind of put that together. We nicely, but in the middle game, we might well end up putting those together a little bit nicely in the middle game. All done with an eye to introducing a mismatch experience. We call it violation of expectation, prediction error, homeostatic imbalance, disequilibrium, destabilizing anxiety, growth incentivizing dissonance, therapeutic leverage, whatever. But it's a mismatch experience such that the system will be forced to re-equilibrate in order to resolve the internal tension and restore homeostatic balance. The thing I always sort of think of when I say this is, let's say there's a really, really little girl, like a really little girl, and she has a little dress on and little panties underneath, and the wind blows up her dress. It's just to restore the balance, she puts the dress down, just to kind of get it back right. So, and we just don't tolerate periods of dishomeostasis and imbalance for extended periods of time. We sort of, are wanting to press for some kind of reconciliation. And again, by the synergy of the good stuff from the outside, the environmental provision, and our underlying innate, inherent capacity to adapt to stress, that will enable us to reconstitute, reconsolidate, restabilize at ever higher levels. All right, so the system will be forced to re-equilibrate in order to resolve the internal tension and restore homeostatic balance, and in order to get from one step to the next. Not yet on the landing, by the way. Every successive restabilization, as each step between landings on the spiral staircase is being climbed, because cycles. We didn't get quite yet to this sort of adaptive resolution. We're still just kind of working it. Every successive restabilization representing an ever higher level of adaptability because of the working through that is being done. The middle game, optimal stress. All right, the end game, the next higher landing before you start it all over again. And of course, those are the adaptations or en route to the adaptations, en route. Awareness, acceptance, accountability, authentic presence, actualizing action. Now we use, and people don't tend to talk about this in the literature, and we should. Some of my patients know that I actually even sometimes just stand up and applaud. Celebratory interventions. that will offer no stress whatsoever. Rather, they will serve to reinforce and celebrate the newfound reconciliation of the two seemingly irreconcilable entities: adaptation, synthesis, compromise position, adaptive resolution. Reminiscent of Freud's horse and rider, as a result of working through the mismatch experience, the defensive reaction of needing to rein the horse in, will it become incrementally transformed into an adaptive response of being able to give the horse free rein, from conflict, in essence, to collaboration. So you don't get rid of what had been, you tease out aspects of it. You still have the horse, said Freud, and you still have the rider, but where before they'd been in conflict, the horse untamed and the rider inexperienced, the id untamed, unmodulated, the ego inexperienced and made anxious, prompted thereby to mobilize a defense, to put a lid on the id, rein the horse in. As a result of the working through, that will tame the horse and make its energies more manageable and strengthen the capacity, reinforce the capacity of the rider, such that the now tamer energy provided by the horse can be channeled. Freud called that sublimation, can be channeled into more worthwhile pursuits and constructive channels, such that horse and rider can ride off into the sunset, no longer in conflict, but in collaboration. So again, the adaptation is a compromised position. You're not getting rid of stuff that had come before, but you're modifying it on some level. All right, the end game, no stress. There you go, the king, the end. So the working through process, which makes possible the ascent by way of the stairs from one landing to the next higher one, will involve this ever-evolving, my eyes on the time, we will have time for Q&A, so be thinking of your Q&As, please, your Qs, I'll think of my As. Anyway, will involve these ever-evolving iterations. So the working through process, these ever-evolving iterations, repetitions producing, that's what iteration means, successively closer approximations to the ultimate synthesis. So from the beginning game of minimal stress and the teasing out of each new thesis and its correlative antithesis, you support the defense in essence. Now, you could say join the defense, and I go back and forth between, well, you join the defense, but for the symmetry, I want to say support the defense. In other words, you don't challenge it. So you empathically listen and tease it out. Terry Real talks about sort of naming sort of painful and difficult truths, but you don't challenge them. You name them, you get them said with these minimally stressful interventions. You're getting named the players. And in essence, supporting is close enough. I'm going to support you. Support the patient. Through the middle game of optimal stress and the ongoing generation of mismatch tension between thesis and antithesis, you challenge and then support the defense, and you keep doing it repeatedly. And it is in this middle game that the actual working through takes place, but the stage was set in the beginning game. To the end game of no stress and the celebration of a temporary synthesis of thesis and antithesis, support the adaptation. Support the adaptation, a détente of sorts, a ceasefire, if you will, until the evolutionary cycle starts all over again. Okay, some of you know this one, it's on shampoo bottles. Wash, rinse, and repeat. All right, provide minimal stress, provide optimal stress, and repeat. I love that one. All right, so we could also think of the incremental morphing, remember the transformation playbook and that beautiful butterfly. The incremental morphing of a caterpillar into a butterfly is another visual metaphor for the evolutionary process, whereby unevolved defense gradually morphs into more evolved adaptation. Just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, she became a butterfly. And thanks to Hannah Levinson, thank you, Hannah, for this. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom, Aeneas Nin. All right, now, kind of a few little examples, and then I'm stopping, and we'll have time for Q&A. So, for example, the thesis, very simply put, the patient has a very special relationship with her dad. a very, very special relationship with her dad. Antithesis, oh, the price she pays. She comes to understand that it is probably interfering with her ability to find an appropriate life partner. In this particular case, in someone else's case, it wouldn't be so. I'm talking about a particular patient I'm thinking of several patients actually. So the patient has a very special relationship with her dad, very, very special relationship. The problem is, sort of like Houston, we have a problem. She comes to understand that it's probably interfering with her ability to find an appropriate life partner. And this might well, these here players might well get named in the beginning game, you know, gently teasing out and identifying what we're talking about here, what might well be in conflict, but we're not putting them in conflict, but we're just getting a sense of what we're talking about here. The working through process. Her unresolved Oedipal longings in relation to her dad must be worked through, quite possibly, or it could be other stuff, but in these cases I'm thinking of, quite frankly, unresolved Oedipal longings in relation to her dad must be worked through. The synthesis being the patient ultimately finds someone like her dad. Now, the reason I had to laugh is people who know me know that I always call my dear sweet Gunner, with whom I've been for like 47 years. I also say, my dear sweet dad. So you might get it that, you know, whatever. There's work to be done for me in my work. As I put it, I had over 8 years, 3 times a week with a psychoanalytically oriented licensed clinical social worker. And we did a lot of work. Then I went on for my training analysis with a male MD, and I did I did 4 years of that in order to get certified to be a psychoanalyst. All right, so anyway, I guess I know this one, but some of my patients also know this one. All right, thesis. So this is the second of 4. The patient indulges herself too much with food. Antithesis. Houston, we have a problem. She now has a serious weight problem that is interfering with her health. So the middle game, that was the beginning game, get those named, identify the players. The working through process, she must work through her feelings of deprivation in relation to her mother. In this particular case that I'm thinking about. Synthesis, the patient decides to try intermittent fasting. All right, but now it could turn out that so that's that she gets to a landing. All right, an action item here. Okay, we're going to try intermittent fasting. She comes back the next week and says, well, quite frankly, I was able to do it for 3 days, but then the next 4 days, I couldn't keep up the regimen. It was too depriving. So that becomes the new thesis and another antithesis, too severe, too depriving. So some more work needs to be done to work that through. And in that way, we are ascending the fractals, V1, V2, V3, rough draft 1, rough draft 2, rough draft 3. It's ongoing. So we have both. I know this is pretty intense, but getting from one step to the next, the cycles of disruption, repair, but ultimately landing at some kind of compromised position, some kind of maybe an action item, but some kind of resolution, some kind of adaptive resolution. Although again, that's not all the way there. It's not all the way to the top. So I know, a little confusing, isn't it? Okay, but anyway, that's why I've been having trouble sleeping for the last 2 weeks because it's been very confusing. All right, so there you go. That's the second of 4. Here's the third one. The patient smokes a pack of cigarettes a day to relieve her stress. Antithesis, Houston, we have a problem. She has come to appreciate that her recurrent lung infections are probably exacerbated by the smoking. Beginning game to identify the players. The working through process, middle game. She must take more responsibility for making healthier lifestyle choices and learn better ways to manage her stress. So in different ways, you're going to create juxtaposition, mismatch, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences where you're going to put together thesis and antithesis, and you're going to keep putting them together, keep juxtaposing. We could say old, bad, new, good, old, bad, new, good. We could say pain, gain, We could say illusion, disillusionment, we could say distortion, reality. We could say lost, found, hidden, seen. We can say any number of things, but we're going to like that. Synthesis. a landing. The patient decides to try smoking only 10 cigarettes a day and to take up exercise. All right, but they're still having problems, quite frankly, a new thesis, a new antithesis, and so there'll probably be numbers of more cycles on the ascending spiral staircase. All right, fourth one. Thesis, the patient has been having an affair with a married man and she desperately wishes that he would leave his wife. Antithesis, Houston, we have a problem. He's made it very clear that he never will. The working through process, she must grieve the reality that she will never be able to have him exclusively as her own, just as she was never able truly to have her dad. Synthesis, the patient decides to continue the affair, but this is the landing, but her expectations have become a little more realistic. This is a patient with whom I'm working currently. And when I say her expectations have become a little more realistic, I mean only a little more realistic. And she knows on some level that she should not be putting all her eggs in the one basket. So there are going to be lots of more landings by the time we're done. All right, in truth, second to last slide here. In truth, most evolutionary processes, and not just the working through process in psychodynamic psychotherapy, involve reconciling two seemingly irreconcilable, diametrically opposed entities, thesis and its correlative antithesis, in order to arrive ultimately at an adaptive resolution, synthesis, but as noted earlier, a synthesis that then becomes a new thesis and the starting point for a whole new cycle. Version 1, version 2, version 3. The developmental process, the growth process, the change process, the creative process, the writing process, different drafts, preparing a new set of PowerPoint slides. This happens to be V37. All right, learning a new language, learning a new skill, negotiating a new relationship, adapting to ever-changing environments, transitioning from caterpillar to butterfly. Evolution is responsible for both the remarkable similarities that we see across all life forms and their breathtaking diversity. My very last slide, starting at the bottom actually, as for example, the creative process. Using dialectic to strengthen ideas. So the idea, so you're writing something, creating something. Idea thesis is systematically challenged. Antithesis, Houston, we have a problem. Incorporating this feedback creates a new thesis, synthesis, and the thesis draws ever closer to the truth with every iteration. And if you're writing a paper, or if you're evolving through anything, learning a new language, negotiating a relationship, it's all an evolutionary process that will involve ongoing cycles of destabilization and then restabilization in response to the mismatch experience created by juxtaposition of thesis and antithesis, cost and benefit. All right, creative process. All right, end of seminar 1. Thank you so much for your support of the Ukrainian psychotherapists. We will hope to see you again in April for seminar 2, because there are things I did not tell you this time, and you'll have to come back 2 months from now. Thank you, Elizabeth. You have to come back 2 months from now in order to find out some more things here. There. They didn't want to be left out. That's Stuart and his brother Stuart. And they're over there, and they're listening, and they said this was okay. If you'd like to be on my mailing list, please email me at and my website is. And then I have lots of references. All right, I'm done. So I am very eager to hear from people, and very open and flexible as opposed to rigid.